Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good of you to be with us on this Monday late afternoon, trending into the early evening. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. It's been your typical Florida afternoon here on the Space Coast. A little bit hot, a little bit muggy, a little bit of clouds rolling into the area as well, which is something that we're keeping a close eye on. Meteorologists didn't have the rosiest outlook for today's launch opportunity, but we'll get to that here in just a moment. Certainly appreciate the 300 plus of you who are watching with us live as we're getting our coverage going today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream. Allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we roll on through the countdown. John Pisani is running the technical operations of the broadcast today in coordination with our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young. Adam Bernstein out and about getting the cameras situated. If you're not following the full photography team here at Spaceflight Now, you can find them at the handles you see on your screen. Adam is at ABurn NYC, John at John Pisani Photo, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr., taking some well-earned time off, and he'll be back in the loop. Michael, that is, before you know it. As we're getting things going here on our coverage of a pair of SES O3b mPOWER satellites, I want to thank our moderators in the live chat who are helping us out today. So we've got Rick Donner with us, and Rick might be holding it down solo at the moment. It certainly looks that way. If any of the other mods do cruise on in throughout the course of the countdown, be sure to give them Spaceflight Now hello. You can make Rick's job that much easier just by following the rules of the live chat. We ask that you refrain from typing in all caps, from delving into overt politics or religion. That you converse in English so that our moderator at the moment, Rick, can understand and respond as necessary. And most importantly, that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. We also have another one of our channel members here in the live chat, Cumulus Granatus, available to help answer folks' questions about the mission. This launch, as is the case with all of our live launch coverage, made possible in no small part by our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So big thanks to folks like the Rocket Girl, Grandpa Jim Pondu, Sulfur for Lunch, Marcia Shaddix, and many others. Butterfly, hello to you. Charles, good to see you. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to our member-only videos here on YouTube. Access to our members-only Discord server. And, of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Things don't look too shabby in this particular vantage point of the Falcon 9 rocket, but if we zoom out a little bit, go to one of our wider perspectives, we can talk a little bit more about the weather. Kind of small talk you want to engage within an elevator, but especially relevant with our mission today. 45th Weather Squadron forecast a coin toss as far as odds for favorable weather with today's launch. You can see we've got a little bit of a breeze going there, which is certainly nice considering how hot and muggy it is here on the Space Coast today. Temperature running about 91 degrees right now. Roughly 65% humidity, so not the worst, not the best, but you can see some of the clouds that are building up around with our VAB shot over here. Meteorologists were concerned for the potential impact for cumulus clouds, anvil clouds, and lightning in the area during the time of launch. SpaceX has a 2-hour window of opportunity today. That window set to open up at 5:12 p.m. Eastern, 21:12 UTC for our friends around the world. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch today, they do have another backup window tomorrow, Tuesday, July 22nd, same start time of 5:12 p.m. Eastern. Last little bit of housekeeping as we get into our coverage today. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings on in the realm of space or spaceflight, feel free to use the YouTube Super Chat feature to help elevate your comment or query. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. As I mentioned, SpaceX counting down towards the opening of the launch window today at 5:12 p.m. Eastern, 21:12 UTC. We'll periodically mention that as we go throughout the countdown, but you can always see how close we are to liftoff with the countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. As folks cruise on into the live chat, if they have questions about the liftoff time, you can direct them up to that part of the screen or into the description box of this video, which has the current liftoff time. If for whatever reason SpaceX makes an adjustment, it will be reflected in both places. We're currently T-minus 48 minutes, 53 seconds, and counting. Everywhere around the Space Coast is in a Phase 1 lightning watch. Not quite as immediate as a Phase 2 lightning warning, but again, meteorologists are closely watching the conditions as we get closer to T0. We're just about 10 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director needs to make the call on the start of propellant load for today's mission if they are going to proceed into a launch attempt at the opening of the window at 5:12 p.m. Eastern. That's just the beginning of the countdown timelines. Let's go ahead and take a beat to walk you through what we're expecting with a good countdown to liftoff for this Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX does its readiness poll electronically, so if it feels like it's in a good posture to do so, it can do that readiness poll a little bit before the T-minus 38-minute mark, but broadly speaking, that's when it happens. Once the go-ahead is given, fueling will start at T-minus 35 minutes with a loading of RP1, which is a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen will begin flowing on board the rocket's first stage. 30 minutes out, a cryogenic helium will start to flow on board the pressure vessels for the rocket's first stage. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. 23 minutes out, the second stage RP1 tank is full. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, the strong back chill down process will begin. This is when SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad before they begin to load liquid oxygen on board the rocket's second stage. We see this visually manifest as the so-called big vent, which here at pad 40 will begin at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. 16 minutes before takeoff, the second stage LOX load will begin. Moving right along, 7 minutes out, the engine chill of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster gets underway. That's when SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket a few degrees, and it stays in that position until liftoff. And then at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before takeoff, the first stage LOX tank is full. Same as true on the second stage, about a minute afterwards, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before takeoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlins are healthy and ignite as expected, the hold-down clamps will release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff, coming up once again at 5:12 p.m. Eastern, 21:12 UTC for those around the world, or just shy of 45 minutes from now. Time now, T-minus 44 minutes, 8 seconds in counting. As we're awaiting the start of fueling for this Falcon 9 rocket, it's certainly a busy time for SpaceX, also a busy time for NASA. Over on the West Coast, they are both preparing for the upcoming rideshare launch, which is spearheaded by NASA's Tracers. These are a pair of satellites that are the marquee, if you will, for that rideshare mission, which includes 3 other payloads that are along for the journey. Principally, the Tracer satellites are going to be studying the interaction of the sun's particles with Earth's magnetic fields to give us better understanding of solar activity and its impact here on Earth. That mission set to lift off on that Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 4 East at 11:13 a.m. Pacific, 2:13 p.m. Eastern, 18:13 UTC for those around the world. All things being equal, the next flight here on the Space Coast will be another Starlink launch. Starlink 10-26 coming up around midweek. Things are somewhat quiet over at Pad 39A right now for SpaceX. Reason being that they are preparing for the launch of the Crew 11 mission. That, of course, is the 11th crew rotation mission to the International Space Station, led by NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, piloted by NASA astronaut Mike Fink. This will be Zena's first trip to space and the fourth for Mike. Next big milestone that'll be happening here, of course, is the mating of the Dragon spacecraft Endeavour to the Falcon 9 first stage booster and second stage, of course. And that'll roll on out to the pad, be brought upright, and like we've seen with other crew missions, there will be a dry dress rehearsal and a static fire test to make sure that both the crew and the support teams are ready to support the launch day milestones for the astronauts and cosmonaut. And then once that dry dress rehearsal is done, the astronauts will egress from the Dragon capsule, go back on their way into quarantine and resting up, and then teams with NASA and SpaceX will progress into a static fire test where they will first tank the Falcon 9 out at Pad 39A and then fire the 9 Merlin engines for just a brief, usually about 10 seconds most, engine firing, just to ensure that everything is healthy and as expected with the Falcon 9 before they go ahead and fuel it with the crew on board. The crew's been in quarantine since July 17th, set to head out here to the Cape coming up next weekend. Time now T-minus 40 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Again, we're just a couple minutes away now at this point from when the SpaceX launch director should be making the call on the start of prop load. The Falcon 9 first stage booster that is flying today's mission is tail number B1090, which will fly for its 6th time today. Again, weather permitting. Certainly not enough to earn it a spot in the Falcon 9 Frequent Flyers Club just yet. Those top 5 spots have been pretty well secured for a while, except for the 5th spot, of course. That's been there's been some jockeying between B10 76, 77, and 78 for a while till B1077 broke that tie. Of course, SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights apiece, so time will tell when next B1067 will fly. More than likely will be a Starlink mission, but you never know. Quite probable, though, since its last 5 missions have all been Starlinks. Here's a look at the bar chart for SpaceX as far as their number of Falcon 9 rockets flown so far this year. They're up to 88 as of July 19th, looking for their 89th Falcon 9 launch coming up here, hopefully in about 38 minutes. The customer, of course, is SES. You can see their logo emblazoned on the payload fairing that's currently encapsulating their next 2 O3b mPOWER satellites. Those are going to be heading out to a medium Earth orbit once they deploy from this Falcon 9 rocket today. It's a photo shot earlier in the day when the rocket was first brought into the upright and launch position. If you had a chance to check out our preview article, we mentioned it in the piece, but for those just tuning in, the first 4 of the O3b mPOWER satellite constellation ran into some electrical problems, and so they weren't able to operate fully up to snuff. SES and its prime manufacturer Boeing enacted some fixes which began to be fully implemented, starting with the O3b mPOWER 7 and 8 satellites, which launched in December of last year. They were fully brought into the constellation back in May, and now the next 2 getting ready to head up. There should be one more O3b mPOWER satellite, number 11, set to launch some point this year is the current plan. And then next year there will be 2 more mPOWER satellites launched on behalf of SES, and that'll bring the mPOWER constellation to completion, at least for the time being. Want a closer look at these satellites? Here's what's under the hood there. That's what these satellites look like in their launch configuration. Is of course not when they were being encapsulated in the Falcon 9 payload fairings, but rather when they were unboxed and delivered from Boeing to SES. Just under 36 minutes, and we're just under a minute to go before the earliest point at which SpaceX could start fueling its Falcon 9 rocket for this mission. Now under 35 minutes to go. At this point, if SpaceX is planning on launching at the opening of the window, fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket is now in work. We're going to be keeping a close eye at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage at this point, looking for signs of fueling as we hopefully get word from SpaceX coming up in the next few minutes, confirming that fueling is in fact in progress. Given that this is a customer mission, there's a decent chance that we might actually get word from SpaceX that tanking of the Falcon 9 rocket is underway. But what we're going to be looking for, assuming that does not happen, is if you look at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket just above the tree line, then you bring your eyes up about a third of the way from the bottom of your screen here. You can see there's a horizontal line that runs perpendicular across the rocket there, which you can just barely make out the lettering of SpaceX. That line is just underneath the X in SpaceX. And it's right about at that point where we'll start to see a frost line form and a little bit of vapor as well as the super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's booster. And we do actually have an update for you, as was certainly probable given the weather outlook. SpaceX has adjusted the T0, now looking at a 10-minute delay. Liftoff time now 5:22 p.m. Eastern. 5:22 p.m. Eastern. 21 5:22 UTC. Going to be adjusting our countdown clock, so please bear with us as we go ahead and get that in work. And with our countdown clock adjusted, you can see we're now back to T-minus 42 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. As we mentioned, there are some potential for anvil clouds as well as some pesky cumulus clouds in the area that are potentially the cause of this delay. SpaceX not remarking about the shift in T0, but more than likely that is the culprit. So now we're back to just about 4 minutes away from the point at which SpaceX will make the call on the starter prop load. Once again, if you're just joining us, expecting us to be further in the count than what you see on the clock at the upper right-hand corner of your screen, SpaceX has pushed back the T0 time for today's mission by 10 minutes. Current T0 is 5:22 p.m. Eastern, 21:22 UTC for those around the world. The company does have a 2-hour launch window for today's launch operations, so still plenty of margin built in at this point. Teams continue to keep a close eye on the weather, though, as we roll through these opportunities. As we continue to roll on, though, do want to thank channel member Daniel H. for gifting 2 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Daniel. Thanks for the generosity. And to our 2 newest gifted channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Daniel in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. SES, the company whose satellites are launching aboard today's Falcon 9 rocket, one of the oldest customers of SpaceX, having made their first flight using the seventh Falcon 9 rocket that launched the SES 8 mission back in December of 2013. As we're awaiting the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and talk briefly about where it's going to be flying once it does leave the pad. Talk a little trajectory for a moment, shall we? Taking a look at a Google Earth view of Slick 40, or Space Launch Complex 40, there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. These two satellites are heading to a medium Earth orbit, and this Falcon 9 is going to be heading due east once it leaves the pad. The first stage booster, B-1090, will look to touch down on the drone ship called, just read the instructions. A good landing on this drone ship today would mark the 129th good landing on that particular drone ship and the 478th booster landing to date. SpaceX will also endeavor to recover the payload fairings that are currently encapsulating the O3b mPOWER satellites. After making their atmospheric reentry, they will splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean a little bit beyond where the booster lands on the drone ship under the support of steerable parachutes. Once down in the water, they'll be scooped up and brought aboard one of SpaceX's recovery vessels, then brought back to Port Canaveral here on the Space Coast, then make their way over to the Hangar X site, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. Once again, my friends, we find ourselves potentially on the cusp of fuel loading beginning on the Falcon 9 rocket. Assuming that the go-ahead was given this time, tanking of the vehicle will begin with RP-1 on the booster and second stage and LOX on the first stage in just about 15 seconds. And we do have a new T0 for you once again. We are now looking at 5:27 p.m. Eastern. 5:27. Just another slight adjustment here. SpaceX and its meteorologists, along with the fine folks at the 45th Weather Squadron, working hard to find that needle eye in order to launch this mission today. Needing a little bit more time, so we're back at T-minus 39 once again. Once again, T minus 35 minutes and counting. Hopefully, the third time will be the charm, and we should get some kind of either indication from SpaceX or a visual confirmation from the rocket that fueling is underway. Again, we're looking for evidence of a frost line forming near the base of the first stage booster and some vapor to form around that area of the rocket as well, just beneath the X in that SpaceX lettering facing our cameras. And we are starting to see that frost line form and a little bit of vapor there near the base of the booster, which means SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket and is going to be making a run at it for a launch attempt at 5:27 p.m. Eastern, 21:27 UTC. And less than 30 seconds ago, they did post confirmation that, yes, prop load is in fact underway. Our eyes do not deceive us. And they don't make any mention of the weather in their tweets, so perhaps they are more confident than the radar suggests from the untrained eye that they've got a path forward. For those of you who may just be joining us now, we are less than 30 minutes away from the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket there at Space Launch Complex 40, carrying 2 of SES's O3b mPOWER satellites on their way to medium Earth orbit. If you are just cruising in, I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. We're glad to have you with us. And I see we've got with us, among our wonderful channel members, Astro Joe, one of our moderators who's cruising on in to help out Rick in the live chat. Good to see you, Joe. At this point in the countdown, SpaceX is loading cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same will be true on the second stage coming up here in the next few minutes. And that helium will pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Certainly appreciate the 2,200 of you who are watching live with us as we're a little less than 28 minutes to go before the target liftoff time for this Falcon 9 rocket. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage now that we have less than 28 minutes to go. The Falcon 9 first stage booster flying this mission, B1090 in the SpaceX fleet. Fairly young, given the tail number. Take a moment briefly to talk about its flight history before we go ahead and see it launch for its 6th mission, coming up here in now just about 27 minutes. As fate would have it, the first launch of this booster was also the last time that we saw O3b mPOWER satellites launch. That was in mid-December of last year, with this rocket taking off from SpaceX's other pad here in Florida. That would be Launch Complex 39A. It landed on the same drone ship, though, that it's targeting a landing on today. Just read the instructions. Next up for this booster was the launch of NASA's Crew 10, sending that Dragon spacecraft up to the International Space Station with liftoff on March 14th of this year. Next up was a rideshare mission, Bandwagon 3, lifting off on April 22nd with a touchdown back at Landing Zone 2. Followed up by a pair of Starlink missions. You had Starlink 6-67 lifting off on May 14th and then 10-18 on June 18th. And that'll bring us up to the hopeful launch, weather permitting, of O3b mPOWER satellites 9 and 10 taking flight today. You can see the booster turnaround times for each of these missions. Quickest turnaround between Bandwagon 3 and the Starlink mission. Not surprising since it was coming off of touching down on one of the landing zones, then preparing for Starlink mission, well known to SpaceX at this point. Time now T minus 21 minutes, 51 seconds and counting. At this point, we're coming up to the point at which SpaceX will start to thermally condition the feed lines there at the pad and begin to load liquid oxygen on board the second stage. We'll see the so-called big vent happen in between those milestones, which should be starting, that venting that is, at around T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. And there you see the big vent is now in full swing. This vent will last about 4 minutes in duration, setting up for second stage liquid oxygen load to begin at the 16-minute mark. Now T minus 17 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Just about a minute left on the big vent here before this process wraps up and SpaceX starts loading liquid oxygen on the second stage of its Falcon 9 rocket. With the big vent now wrapped up, LOX load is about to begin on the second stage, the Falcon 9 rocket. With just about 16 minutes to go, let's take a moment to talk about the launch timeline now. These are the milestones that we would expect to see with a good flight of the Falcon 9 rocket and a nominal setup to deployment of the two O3b mPOWER satellites. Liftoff again, currently targeting 5:27 p.m. Eastern, 21:27 UTC. The rocket will pass through the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure, otherwise referred to as max Q, at about T plus 1 minute and 11 seconds. Then, after thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage, the rocket will go through a few different points of note in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about 2.5 minutes into flight. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage at about T plus 2 minutes and 38 seconds. The payload fairings will be jettisoned at T plus 3 minutes and 21 seconds. 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines will reignite about 6.25 minutes into the mission for a 27-second long entry burn to begin to dramatically slow the vehicle down. Normally then we'll get to the landing burn for those more familiar with the patterns for Starlink missions, but this go around we'll see the Merlin vacuum engine actually conclude its first burn first at about T plus 7 minutes and 51 seconds. And then we'll see the start of the single engine landing burn at about T plus 8 minutes and 11 seconds, setting up the Falcon 9 rocket for a touchdown on the drone ship. Just read the instructions, if all goes well, at T plus 8 minutes and 35 seconds, or thereabouts. Moving right along, SES-2, the second burn of the second stage, lasting just a little more than 30 seconds, will begin at T plus 26 minutes and 55 seconds. That'll be followed by the third burn, which comes a little more than an hour afterwards. So quite a long coast phase before we get to that third burn, lasting 27 seconds in total. Then the first satellite will deploy, T plus 1 hour, 53 minutes and 14 seconds. Then the second and final one, setting sail. A little typo there. It should be the second satellite deploying at just past 2 hours. Time now T minus 11 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. You can see our countdown clock is a little bit ahead of what's coming through on the SpaceX feed. That's because our clock is in real time. What's coming in from SpaceX is on a slight delay. This is a promotional video for the O3b mPOWER constellation. In total, there will be 13 satellites that comprise this medium Earth orbit constellation, with the satellites number 9 and 10 on board today. That's an artist rendering of what those satellites look like in medium Earth orbit. There's set to be one more of these launched this year, and then the final two will take flight coming up in 2026. There's a good visual on those satellites, again, in their launch configuration stacked atop one another. Last month, SES noted that they had brought their most recent two satellites online, the O3b mPOWER satellites 7 and 8, which launched back last December. Time now T minus 8 minutes, 9 seconds and counting ahead of the planned flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX commentator notes that weather has improved to a 20% chance for violation, up from 50%. So, put another way, there's an 80% chance for favorable weather, which is a considerable improvement compared to what we were looking at coming into this launch opportunity. Talking about the Falcon 9 rocket for a minute before we see it fly. SpaceX workhorse, which stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall. It has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. The majority of that, of course, made up by the Falcon's first stage booster. This one is first stage B1090, which has flown 5 times before, looking for flight number 6 today. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In the image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering when the Falcon 9 comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. Engine chill is now underway, by the way, on the booster stage. At the top of the interstage are three mechanical latches which attach the vehicle's second stage, and at first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and four pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the interstage adapter until the point of stage separation. Speaking of the second stage, the upper stage powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. Heard confirmation for first stage RP1 load being complete, as we're now less than 6 minutes to go, so things progressing on time. Coming back to our breakdown of the rocket, the Merlin vacuum engine is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space and produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired 3 times on today's flight before the deployment of the 2 mPOWER satellites. It burns the same propellant mix as the first stage, LOX and RP1. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack, with 5.5 minutes to go in the countdown, these are the payload fairings, which currently encapsulate the 2 mPOWER satellites. Fairings stand 13.1 meters, or 43 feet in height, and are 5.2 meters, or 17.1 feet in diameter. The fairing halves will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. And they'll be brought back to Port Canaveral, turn around for future missions as well. SpaceX notes that today's mission is set to be the 15th launch for SES. As we mentioned back earlier in the broadcast, their first time sending up one of their payloads was with the launch of SES 8 back in 2013. They were also on board the first reflight of a Falcon 9 booster during SES 10. Taking a close look at the Falcon 9 rocket, you see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings that bear the SES logo. And soon the strong back will recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket.
You may also hear the transporter erector, or TE, called the strong back. Same structure, different names. The TE does a lot more than lean. It rolls Falcon 9 out to the pad, raises it vertically, and stays connected through the final seconds. It provides fuel, power, telemetry, and command connections between ground systems and the rocket.
Now, T-minus 3 minutes and counting. The first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full at this point. Should be hearing a call out on that shortly.
Propellant is loaded late into the countdown, and that's intentional.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And with that call for stage 1 LOX load being complete, we're now awaiting a similar call on the rocket's second stage, which should happen right about the 2-minute mark. For those of you who were not with us earlier in the countdown when we talked about trajectory, the rocket will fly due east once it leaves the pad in 2 minutes. Her confirmation for stage 2 LOX load. You're seeing the ground gas closeouts now. That is the additional venting they're seeing from the pad as SpaceX releases the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines. 1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
We're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch, and then we'll be off to the races. Should be coming in the next few seconds.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Didn't hear that go for launch, but the count is progressing. We're at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. We have a hold. The launch has been aborted today. Standing by for any updates.
Launch has been aborted.
Standing
by for an update from SpaceX, but the launch was just aborted.
All right, team, let's move into the offload procedure in 1.160.
We just heard an abort call out for over the nets. Let's listen in for any additional information about the abort from the launch director.
Again, if you're just joining us, SpaceX called an abort with about 11 seconds remaining on the clock. The countdown was progressing. We didn't actually hear a call out for the SpaceX launch director giving their go for launch, but we did hear the call 30 seconds out. So it appeared for a brief moment as though the countdown was continuing to move along as expected. But again, at 11 seconds before the planned liftoff, the abort call was made. We're standing by for any additional words from the SpaceX launch director today. Because SpaceX does not have the option to hold its count, any hold that is called once fueling has begun is an automatic scrub of the mission for today. What you saw there on your screen is just an automatic recycle on the countdown clock to T-minus 15 minutes, but you can ignore that as you can see that it's been taken down now. The next opportunity on the schedule for SpaceX to be able to launch this mission would be tomorrow at 5:12 p.m. Eastern. They, again, have a 2-hour window.
Now, if you're just joining us, we just heard an abort called out over the nets, and we're standing by for more information.
However, while the weather today was giving some signs of hope as we got close to the count, again, we came in with a coin toss on the weather, and it proved supposedly up to 80% favorability. 80% doesn't fully discount that 20%, and we're standing by for the reason for the scrub, but that 20% may have won the day. In a backup scenario, tomorrow SpaceX has a 75% chance for violating weather in their 2-hour window. Put another way, that means they have just a 25% chance for favorable weather with a launch opportunity tomorrow. Also, tomorrow presents the potential conflict. We don't know that it is verifiably a conflict, but out on the West Coast, SpaceX and NASA and its partners are preparing for the launch of the Tracers mission. That flight set to lift off at 11:13 a.m. Pacific, 2:13 p.m. Eastern, which would be, of course, a few hours ahead of the start of the window for this mission. So likely the two won't necessarily cross paths. It may just be an exceedingly long launch day for us, and you may get a potential doubleheader if the weather cooperates here. Again, we are standing by for further updates from the SpaceX launch director as to the reason for the scrub of this mission, which, when it does launch, will add the next two O3b mPOWER satellites to SES's medium Earth orbit constellation.
Thanks for joining us again for the mPOWER D mission. We heard an abort called, and we will be closing today's webcast. One purpose of the countdown is to help us catch any potential issues before flight, so that we can continue to ensure rapid and reliable access to space. Again, the vehicle and payload remain in good health, and we hope you'll join us for our next launch opportunity. If you're interested in more launch coverage, be sure to check out spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information. And remember to check out additional updates at SpaceX on X. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.
And as we just heard, SpaceX commentators ending their stream without giving a reason for the scrub today, noting that the vehicle and the payload are both healthy, but noting that the final minutes of the countdown, of course, are intended to catch any potential hiccups on the road to launch. So we did not get a definitive answer on whether or not this was the weather, but given how things were trending, it seemed like they had a good window of opportunity that was building and giving them more confidence. But we'll have to wait and see how SpaceX decides to proceed from here. If this is just a quick fix that can be done at the pad, if this is a ground systems issue, if there's an issue with the Falcon 9 itself. Again, we don't know right now, so it would be speculative to postulate any further than that. But of course, we will keep you all apprised as we learn more and update you and have a new dedicated live stream when next SpaceX is ready to launch this mission, whenever that may be. Do want to thank a few folks in the live chat for your support today. Really appreciate you being out here with us in spirit. Chad Singer with a $10 super chat saying, just as I was tying my shoes and heading to the door to try to watch from Fort Lauderdale, there's a 25% chance I'll see y'all here tomorrow. Thanks, Will. Thank you, Chad, for the kind words. Also, thanks to Jim Megger for a very generous $50 super chat. This obviously coming in from before the scrub was called. Jim says, Lisa Bean, Jim Megger watching again from Snoqualmie, Washington with the cats, Kip, Lola, and Miko, who never quite achieves engine cutoff when we want her to. Yeah, kittens can be around bugs just like that. If only there were a Miko for energetic cats. Regardless, again, we want to thank our team here for being ready to support this launch opportunity. Thanks to our moderators in live chat, to Rick and Astro Joe for hanging tough with us today. Big thanks to John running the technical operations of the broadcast alongside Steven and Adam for getting the cameras set up. Sometimes you're just all dressed up with nowhere to go, and that's the way the cookie crumbles. And I'm done mixing metaphors now. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter of Spaceflight Now. Thanks again to all of you once more for being with us, and we hope you hit that subscribe button on your way out the digital door and join us once again whenever SpaceX is next ready to launch, which will very well be the Tracers mission coming up again. That is tomorrow afternoon. For those on the West Coast, 11:13 a.m. Pacific, 2:13 p.m. Eastern for us on the West or on the East, 18:13 UTC for those around the world. For all of us and the team here at Spaceflight Now, hope you all have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.